Pokemon as a franchise, I think, needs no introduction at this point. The vast majority of people have at least some knowledge of the franchise in the year 2024, especially in the online gaming space. I mean, it's literally the highest grossing media franchise ever, and most fans have at least a vague idea of how the series came to be and the history of the franchise. So I won't waste your time regurgitating information that's already been shared a million times already. No. These videos are all about my own personal history of the franchise, any history I have with each of the games, and my thoughts and feelings of them today. Hey guys, my name is Logan, otherwise known as Alphys, and today I'm going to start a video series going over a franchise that I've been playing for close to 20 years now. With that said, however, I actually don't have much of a history of the subject of today's video, or with the original Gen 1 games as a whole for that matter. While I don't remember how I was first introduced to the series, I do remember my first experience with the games. It was in Christmas of 2005 when I got a copy of Pokemon X Seagull Darkness for the GameCube. That'll be a story for another video. But that's where I got my start with the franchise, right at the tail end of Gen 3, and right before Gen 4 started. Now, my first experience with Gen 1 would come in the form of Fire Red years later, and it would take even longer before I would play the original games proper, when they were added to the 3DS eShop in 2016. While I remember playing some odd browser versions of the game throughout my childhood, the virtual console versions were my first true time with the games. You'd think with how much time I've spent with this franchise, I'd be more interested in seeing how they got their start, but I just never did. To be fair, trying to convince a 10 to 16 year old to play these old Game Boy RPGs, when he has all these new ones to play and has already played their, spoiler alert, much better remakes, does sound like a hard sell. In fact, until this video, I've never once played through any of the originals all the way through. So for one of the only times in this video series, this will be a mostly new experience for me. And with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Now, while this video is primarily going to be about Pokemon Yellow, I will be talking about Gen 1 as a whole, and we'll bring up version differences I know about as they come up. And I think the best way to showcase them is with the game's sprite work. I'll just say it straight up, Pokemon Yellow looks really nice for a Game Boy game. They went through and redid all the sprite work for the Pokemon and it all looks really nice, and much better than how they look like in Red and Blue. Pokemon like Pidgey actually looked like, well, Pidgey, and overall there was a clear effort to make them all look more like their Sugimori artwork. And the add color when played on Game Boy Color really makes them pop. Although this praise is only for the front-facing sprites, as unfortunately the back-facing sprites did not get the same treatment, as they're all the same for Red and Blue, so Pokemon like Venus would look like a complete mess when viewed from behind. Like, I mean, what am I even looking at here? Outside of that, the art and sprite work all around is pretty good. All the gym leaders got upgraded sprites that work really well, based off their anime appearances, and I think it's a nice upgrade overall. While we're on the subject of visuals, I'll just touch on the graphics in general. They're fine. I mean, I don't have much to say if I don't put much stock into graphics myself. And as long as everything is readable, then I'm fine with how they look. And yeah, everything here is mostly readable. There were a few moments where I thought I could walk into an area when I couldn't, and some areas were a bit eye-burning like the Pokemon Mansion. I mean, holy hell, look at this. But that might have only been the case since I had the game blown up on my computer monitor. On an actual Game Boy, it's probably not as hard on the eyes. On a final note for the game's presentation is the music, which honestly shocked me with how good some of it was. Not all of it is memorable, but some of the tracks they managed to compose is honestly great. Standing out as being things like the Pokemon Mansion, the Gym Battle theme, the Champion theme, hell, all the battle themes in general, and the Surf theme, which was honestly a really nice relaxing piece during a long voyage. Alright, now it's no secret that early Pokemon doesn't really have much in the way of story, and yeah, there's not much here. You're a young kid setting out on a journey to be the very best, you collect 8 gym badges, stop a team of Pokemon gangsters, and destroy your rival's dreams. It's very simple and pretty much only about the journey you have through the Kanto region, and that's for good and bad. Kanto is a weird region, both linear but open at the same time, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. In the early game, you're pretty much railroaded through Pewter, Cerulean, Vermilion, and then Lavender. But once you reach Celadon, the game pretty much opens up the rest of the region. But this isn't without issue. From Celadon, you can challenge Erika, Koga, and Sabrina in pretty much any order you want. The issue this brings is that to make sure you don't have too easy of a time with them, with the exception of Erika, their levels are pretty close together. Even Blaine, who you can't find until you at least beat Koga, is still around the same level, so things feel a bit stagnant. This issue feels even more exasperating on Yellow, as they all had their levels fairly significantly increased. While this makes Blaine and Giovanni closer to the Elite Four in terms of levels, this can make taking on Koga and Sabrina a bit of a daunting task, as while their levels are 45 to 50, all the trainers around them are still only rocking Pokemon at like level 25 to 30, many of which aren't even fully evolved, so there's a bit of a level disparity there. I wouldn't call these games particularly difficult. I personally finished the game with most of my mons close to level 50, and had a fairly easy time overall. But it's still distracting and makes things feel very all over the place. If you want to follow along with the levels of the gym leaders, then after only the 4th gym, you basically have to explore the rest of the region to everything up to Silphco, before fighting either Koga or Sabrina. And this means that there could potentially be a huge gap between major fights, to make the middle of the game feel empty and the end game feel a bit bloated, which is how I felt. This might not be an issue to everyone, and I'll admit, this is something that just irks me more than most, since I hate grinding, and just prefer a more natural level curve to this. Overall, I just wish that the basic trainers were a bit tougher, so the gym leaders' high levels didn't feel so disconnected. Ugh. Sorry about that little tangent. I don't even know if any of that makes sense, and unfortunately, it won't be the last time I complain about level curves in this franchise. Anyways, I'm over here yapping about levels, and we haven't even gone over the gameplay yet, so why don't we go ahead and do that now. Gameplay was honestly a pleasant surprise. I know the enduring joke and criticism of the series is that it hasn't changed in close to 30 years now, but there is at least some truth to that statement. Most of my modern knowledge translated well enough, but the times the game's age reared its ugly head, oh boy, did it. Where do we start? Well, first off, the crit mechanics. Holy hell, the crit mechanics. Why is crit tied to speed? Like, literally. The higher a Pokemon's speed, the higher its crit rate. Meaning fast mons like Electrode, Gengar, Alakazam, Jolteon, and Aerodactyl all have insane crit rates. Although, funnily enough, due to a programming error, the move Focus Energy, which is supposed to raise a Pokemon's crit rate, actually lowers it instead. I saw a poor Macho do this, and its normally auto-crit Karate Chop didn't do anything. And on the subject of crit-based moves, they are busted. They're basically guaranteed to crit. I personally had both Razor Leaf and Slash on my team. I think I only saw them not crit once between the two of them. This makes these moves way better than their base power leads you to believe. My Venusaur just became an auto-crit machine. But hey, I love seeing big damage, so being able to do this was admittedly a fun time. But when that other shoe dropped, oh boy, did it dropped. Agatha's last Gengar was a nightmare because of its constant crit psychics that just demolished my poor team. On the note of Gengar, let me bring up the special stat. So in this game, instead of special attack and special defense, special is just one single stat, meaning how much damage you deal and how much you take is decided by that one stat. This makes some Pokemon a nightmare, and I think nothing exemplifies this more than Pokemon Tower. This area was a hellish nightmare to go through with my team, since the only physical moves I had were normal and fighting, and the only Pokemon you fight here are a bunch of Ghastly and Haunter. Two Pokemon that are usually pretty squishy, but with special being only one stat, they were always able to survive at least 2 to 3 attacks from my team of mainly special attackers. And they had moves like Confuse Ray, Hypnosis, and Lick. 3 moves with some sort of status effect, which just made this area a nightmare. And to show that I'm not exaggerating, here's a fun little unedited clip from the playthrough on Twitch.
Please, War Turtle, I beg of you, do not hit yourself with confusion. Dang it, dude. Oh my gosh. Oh, you're joking. You're joking. Please. Oh, no. Please. Please, please, please. Oh my god. I'm gonna... No.
Yeah, by the time I was done with that area, I was exhausted. And since we've mentioned it, this is my chance to bring up another fun little thing about Gen 1. Status. In particular, Sleep. All their status works basically the same as the later gens, except for Sleep. Sleep is your worst nightmare. Not only can it last up to 7 turns, but your Pokemon can't act the turn they wake up, meaning that if you're slower than your opponent, they can theoretically put you into an infinite sleep loop, with the only thing stopping that being Hypnosis's lack of accuracy. As a Snorlax trainer, this was a pain. Another fun move that complements sleep is Wrap, which in this gen completely immobilizes the opponent while dealing damage each turn. And yes, if you were faster than the opponent, you can again put them in an infinite Wrap loop. Every time I fought one of the Bellsprout family, I wet myself because they have Sleep Powder and Wrap. These are the 3 horsemen, and you can't convince me otherwise. A few small notes I could touch upon. I noticed a lot of stat moves like Growl, Screech, Leer, and the like seem to fail a lot. I don't know the reason behind it, but it was a very interesting thing to see. Oh yeah, I also never saw Roar or Whirlwind work once. I have no idea what was up with that. Also, this is a side note and a side note, but why is Gust a normal move in Gen 1? It's only learned by a bunch of flying types, and it's kind of weird. I was very confused when my Pikachu wasn't resistant to it. And on the note of resistances, the dual types also acted very odd. Sometimes they got slammed by a super effective hit that should have been neutral, or resisted a hit that should have been neutral. It feels like they only checked to see one type out of their 2 types and just went with that. It's made things kind of awkward with certain Pokemon. Also, the obligatory Psychic actually being immune to Ghost in Gen 1, meaning Psychic effectively has no weaknesses, and Poison is also weak to Bug in this gen, which is something new I learned and kind of scared the hell out of me when my Nidoking took major damage from Jolteon's Pin Missile. Okay, that was a lot of negativity, but I did have a good time here. For example, while movesets are fairly limited, the TMs kind of make up for this. A lot of TMs contain weird and interesting moves like Water Gun, Bubble Beam, Fissure, Mega Punch, Mega Kick, Body Slam, and a whole bunch of fairly useful moves. And this made Pokemon that didn't get many good learn set moves some decent utility. I wasn't expecting that, and it honestly surprised me. Routes are also fairly fun to explore. Yeah, most of them are pretty straight lines, but they sprinkle just enough goodies along the path for you to find. And plenty of trainers to satisfy those battle maniacs out there. And despite all my complaining about the broken battle mechanics, most of the time battles were fairly stable and worked as intended. And if the number of games this franchise has spawned is an indication, it is a time and tested battle formula that even in its most primitive state, still managed to provide a good time. I even had a few moments of genuine strategy that rewarded me, like getting my Snorlax Amnesia, which is essentially the equivalent of 2 Calm Minds in this game, making him both a special wall and hit hard with his Psychics. If there's anything I have to praise not just for this game, but for the franchise as a whole, it's the team building, as I always have a great time putting a team together, and that was true even here. So I would like to take a moment and kind of give a brief overview and a shout out to the mods I had for this playthrough, as I feel like they really helped make this game as fun as it was. First and foremost, we of course have my starter, Pikachu, who was unfortunately easily the weakest member of the team. Since the starter Pikachu is not any different from ordinary Pikachu, outside of an updated moveset, and he can't evolve, meaning you're stuck with these stats for the entire game. But even with that being said, he still became in clutch when he needed to, especially after learning Thunderbolt, and that high speed helped with some well-timed Thunder Waves. Although, missing twice on Gary's Cloister was still disappointing in that final battle, meaning he didn't have any role to play there. Second, we have Nidoking. Not only one of my favorite Gen 1 mods, but just one of my favorite mods in general. He was a great asset to the team and really held together. With a great moveset and all-around stats, he could deal damage and take damage on both ends of the spectrum. And his decent type of poison ground meant once he learned Earthquake, he was a monster on the battlefield. Yeah, that weakness to Psychic was kind of bad, but other than that, he was amazing. Definitely the MVP of the team, no doubt. Thirdly, we had Venusaur, who didn't really stand out the most out of the team, but he wasn't bad either. He never had any huge moments, but didn't have any huge lows like some of the other members. Starting out though, he only had Vine Whip for stab, which sucked, since it only has 10 PP. But once he learned Razor Leaf, which was an auto crit button, he became a reliable source of damage and was bulky enough to take most super effective hits at least once. Other than that though, he didn't really have much of a moveset. Fourth, there was Charizard, who was probably the second weakest member for most of the journey. Due to Gen 1's limited moveset, he only knew Ember until level 46, and there's no Flamethrower TM anywhere in the game. And his only other option was Fire Blast, which you don't get until Blaine at the tail end of the game. Because of this, he just didn't get to do much outside of spamming Body Slam, and maybe using Ember to at least deal some good damage to grass types. Once he fully evolved and learned Fly and Slash, he came into his own a bit, but still struggled the most out of the team. Fifth, which you could probably guess by now, was Blastoise, who, behind Nidoking, was one of the most reliable members of the team, always having good moves with a reliable bulk to back them up. Being a water type was always nice, and Blastoise filled that nicely. Its strong Bubble Beam eventually turned Surf, with Ice Beam and Blizzard to back those up. Good coverage all around for a great team. Last but not least, we had Snorlax. He struggled a bit at first due to not having much in his moveset, but once he learned Body Slam and some TM support, he became a monster on the team. His massive HP set with a decent enough defense stat made him a great hit taker, who hit hard back with a good 110 attack stat. His special did leave something to be desired, especially compared to how huge his special defense is in later games. But luckily, as I mentioned, he gets Amnesia, which is the equivalent to 2 Calm Minds in this gen, which gave him a great boost, which let him hit hard with Psychic and take those Psychics really well. All in all, Pokemon Yellow pleasantly surprised me for how old the game is. I didn't go into expecting to hate it, but I wasn't expecting to like it either. I had a fun time going through it despite the flaws. But one thing I like to think about is how these games took the world by storm. I mean, Pokemon Red and Green released in 1996 for the Game Boy, a piece of 7-year-old hardware when these games released in Japan, and 9 years old when they finally released in the West during 1998. Like, think of what's coming out. Both Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI came out years before either of these. Hell, Final Fantasy VII came out between the Japanese and Western release, and that's only rival RPGs. This was the same year as the Nintendo 64, and games like Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time were on the way. The PS1 had already been pumping out great games for a while before these came out. It's honestly a wonder that anyone was even paying attention to these two GamePort RPGs, even with the Nintendo branding on them. Maybe it was just the expectation of the Game Boy not being able to handle the console experiences. So these games being primitive even by 96 and 98 standards wasn't all that hard of a sell. And even then, these games are impressive for their hardware. The fact they managed to cram that much into a device made in the last breath of the 80s is crazy. And we're not even done with this hardware yet, since Gen 2 was made on basically the same tech. Pokemon definitely had that secret sauce, because the fact these games took off like they did is nothing short of a miracle. Hell, even to this day, they are still the best-selling games of the franchise, which is just insane. This look back has been very interesting, and it's got me really interested in seeing the rest of the series. But we'll just have to wait and see until that time comes. Hey there, if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. This was a first time experience for me, both as a video maker and editor, so things are not going to be perfect. But hey, if you enjoyed it, I'm glad you did. I need to give a huge shout out to my friend Seth, who made this artistic render you saw throughout the video. This would not have been possible without him. He's currently working on an indie FPS called Void Collector, so if that interests you, go give his channel a follow. It'll be linked down in the description. On another note, if you're more interested in more of my content, I stream regularly on Twitch, where I'll be streaming Pokemon Crystal in the coming days, so if you're interested in that, go give that a follow. I'll also be uploading all the VODs to my second channel, which will be linked down in the description. Other than that, guys, this has been a fun time, and I will see you all next time in the Pokemon Crystal video. Have a great night, everyone.